Right now, as you are watching this, rescue teams across the northern Caribbean are working through the aftermath of the most powerful earthquake to strike the region in more than a decade. At 04:47 local time on August 3, 2026, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake ruptured along the Oriente Fault Zone, the major plate boundary running along the northern coast of the Caribbean plate, with an epicenter located approximately 60 kilometers south of the eastern tip of Cuba and 90 kilometers west of the northwestern coast of Haiti. The earthquake struck at a depth of 14 kilometers, shallow enough that its full energy reached the surface with minimal geological cushioning. Strong shaking was felt across eastern Cuba, northwestern Haiti, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, the southeastern Bahamas, and as far as the Dominican Republic and the Turks and Caicos. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, which also covers the Caribbean basin, issued a tsunami threat message for coastal areas within 300 kilometers of the epicenter within 4 minutes of the rupture. Tsunami waves of 30 to 80 centimeters were observed at tide gauges along Cuba's southeastern coast and Haiti's northwestern peninsula before the threat was canceled 2 hours later. As of the time this video was produced, the confirmed death toll stood at 214 people, 187 in Haiti, 26 in Cuba, and 1 in Jamaica from a heart attack during the shaking. More than 1,900 people are reported injured, and those numbers are early. Communication with the most affected areas of Haiti's northwestern peninsula remains severely degraded, and the pattern from previous Caribbean earthquakes tells us that early tolls from this region historically undercount the final figures significantly. Today we are going to break down exactly what happened on the Oriente Fault, why the same magnitude earthquake produces radically different outcomes on different sides of the Windward Passage, what the 2010 Haiti catastrophe and the 2020 Cuba earthquake teach us about this exact fault system, and what the science says about the seismic future of a region where 44 million people live along one of the most active and least discussed plate boundaries in the Western Hemisphere. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Are you in Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, or anywhere in the Caribbean? Did you feel this earthquake? Tell me your country, your city, and what those seconds felt like where you were. The Caribbean diaspora across the United States, Canada, and Europe is watching for news of their families right now, and first-hand accounts from the ground are the most valuable information in the first hours of any disaster. And if you have family in the affected zone that you have reached, tell us what they are reporting. Subscribe right now if you want continuing coverage of this earthquake, the aftershock sequence, and every significant seismic development in the Caribbean as the situation unfolds. Completely free, a thumbs up helps this reach the diaspora communities searching for accurate information right now instead of rumors. Let us go for 6,000 likes on this one. Now, let us get into what actually happened. The Oriente Fault Zone is the northern boundary of the Caribbean Plate, a left lateral strike-slip fault system running east to west along the deep submarine trench known as the Cayman Trough, passing south of Cuba's Sierra Maestra Mountains and connecting eastward toward the Septentrional Fault that crosses the northern Dominican Republic. Along this boundary, the Caribbean Plate moves eastward relative to the North American Plate at approximately 2 centimeters per year. That rate is slower than California's San Andreas system, which moves at roughly 5 centimeters per year, but slower plate motion does not mean smaller earthquakes. It means longer intervals between them, longer periods of strain accumulation, and populations with less living memory of what the fault is capable of when it finally ruptures. The August 3rd earthquake ruptured a segment of the Oriente Fault that seismologists at the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center had specifically identified as a seismic gap. A section that had not produced a major earthquake since the historical record of the region began in the Spanish colonial era. Dr. Joan Lachman, senior seismologist at the UWI Seismic Research Center, stated in the center's Rapid Assessment Bulletin, the August 3rd event ruptured a fault segment that has been accumulating strain for at least 2 centuries based on the historical catalog. The magnitude and location are consistent with the release of that accumulated strain. This event was not unexpected in the geological sense. It was unexpected only in the sense that no one can know the specific date a locked fault will fail. Coined quote. The shaking that reached eastern Cuba was severe. Santiago de Cuba, the country's second largest city with a metropolitan population of approximately 500,000 people, located barely 70 kilometers from the epicenter, experienced strong ground motion, lasting nearly 40 seconds. Older colonial-era masonry buildings in the city's historic core sustained significant damage. Multiple partial collapses were reported in the Tivoli and Los Hoyos districts. Cuba's national civil defense system, one of the most practiced emergency response structures in the Caribbean, built through decades of hurricane response, activated immediately. Evacuations of damaged structures began within the first hour. The 26 confirmed deaths in Cuba, while tragic, represent a remarkably contained toll for strong shaking in a city with a large stock of aging masonry construction. Haiti's northwestern peninsula tells a different story, and understanding why requires understanding what happened to this same country 16 years ago on a related fault. On January 12, 2010, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck Haiti on the Enriquillo Plantain Garden Fault, the southern strike-slip boundary of the same plate system whose northern boundary just ruptured. The epicenter was 25 kilometers from Port-au-Prince. The earthquake killed more than 220,000 people by most credible estimates, one of the deadliest earthquakes in recorded human history, not because a magnitude 7.0 is inherently that lethal. The 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake in California was nearly the same magnitude and killed 63 people. Haiti's 2010 catastrophe was the product of unreinforced concrete construction erected without seismic engineering across one of the most densely populated cities in the hemisphere, a state with minimal building code enforcement capacity, and a population that had no earthquake preparedness culture because the fault had been silent for over 200 years. The reconstruction that followed 2010 was slow, incomplete, and repeatedly disrupted by the 2016 impact of Hurricane Matthew, by political instability, by the 2021 magnitude 7.2 earthquake on the same southern fault that killed over 2,200 people in the Tiburon Peninsula, and by the security crisis that has constrained state function across much of the country in the years since. The northwestern peninsula, where the August 3rd shaking was strongest on the Haitian side, contains some of the country's least developed infrastructure and most limited emergency response capacity. The 187 confirmed deaths reported so far come primarily from the towns of Mole Saint-Nicolas, Bombardopolis, and Baie de Haine, communities where unreinforced masonry and concrete block construction is nearly universal, and where the nearest functional hospital capacity is hours away under the best conditions. The contrast between the Cuban and Haitian outcomes from the same earthquake is not about geology. Both countries experienced comparable shaking intensities at comparable distances from the rupture. The difference, 26 deaths against 187 and climbing, is the accumulated result of decades of institutional divergence. Cuba's civil defense system, its practiced evacuation culture, and its state capacity to enforce even basic structural standards against Haiti's compounding cycle of disaster, incomplete recovery, and constrained governance. The earthquake does not care about any of this. The death toll is written by what the earthquake finds when it arrives. There is a second dimension to this event that the region's seismologists are watching closely: what it means for the rest of the fault system. Strike-slip fault systems like the Caribbean plate boundary release strain in sequences. A major rupture on one segment changes the stress distribution on adjacent segments, sometimes relieving stress, sometimes loading it. The 2010 Haiti earthquake demonstrated this directly. Post-event analysis showed that the rupture increased stress on adjacent unruptured segments of the Enriquillo fault, segments that ultimately contributed to the 2021 event further west. The question now being modeled by teams at the USGAES, UWI, and the French Geological Survey, which monitors the fault system through its overseas departments of Guadeloupe and Martinique, is what the August 3rd Oriente rupture has done to the stress state of the adjacent segments, the section running west toward the Cayman Islands, and critically, the septentrional fault running east through the densely populated Cibao Valley of the northern Dominican Republic. The septentrional fault passes directly beneath Santiago de los Caballeros, the Dominican Republic's second-largest city, home to more than 1 million people. Paleoseismic studies of this fault have documented that it produces major earthquakes, magnitude 7.5 and above, at intervals of roughly 800 to 1200 years, and that its last major rupture was approximately 800 years ago. The fault is within its estimated recurrence window. Dominican seismologists have been stating this publicly for 2 decades. The August 3rd earthquake, depending on what the stress transfer modeling shows in the coming weeks, may have moved that fault closer to failure, or further from it. The modeling will take time, and the honest answer right now is that nobody knows which. What we do know is the historical pattern of this plate boundary. In 1842, a major earthquake on this same northern fault system destroyed the Haitian city of Cap-Haïtien, killing an estimated 5,000 people, roughly half the city's population at the time, with a tsunami that swept the northern coast. In 1946, a magnitude 8.1 earthquake struck the Samana Peninsula of the Dominican Republic, the largest instrumentally recorded earthquake in the Caribbean, generating a tsunami that killed approximately 1,800 people. The Northern Caribbean plate boundary produces great earthquakes. It has always produced them. The intervals between them are long enough that each generation that experiences one is experiencing it, effectively for the first time. That is the deeper story beneath the August 3rd event. 44 million people live in the island nations along this plate boundary: Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and the smaller islands. The majority of the region's building stock is unreinforced masonry or non-engineered concrete. Building code enforcement ranges from functional in some territories to essentially absent in others. Earthquake insurance penetration is among the lowest in the hemisphere. And the region's seismic monitoring, while significantly improved since 2010 through international investment, still has coverage gaps that slow the rapid characterization of events like this one. Let us be direct about the practical message, because information without action is just anxiety. If you are in the affected zone right now, aftershocks will continue for weeks. The largest aftershock following a magnitude 7.6 main shock is typically around magnitude 6.6. Itself a damaging earthquake, and can occur days or weeks after the main shock. Do not re-enter damaged buildings. Structures weakened by the main shock can be collapsed by aftershocks that would not have damaged them when intact. If your building has visible cracks in load-bearing walls, new tilting, or separation between walls and floors, stay out until it has been assessed. If you are on the coast anywhere in the Northern Caribbean, any strong earthquake you feel is your tsunami warning. The August 3rd event produced only a minor tsunami because the rupture was predominantly horizontal. Strike-slip motion moves the seafloor sideways rather than vertically, displacing less water. But sections of this fault system can produce vertical motion, and the 1842 and 1946 precedents show that this boundary generates deadly tsunamis. If the ground shakes strongly and you are near the shore, move inland and uphill immediately. Do not wait for sirens that may not exist in your community. For the diaspora watching from abroad, the most useful things you can do in the first week are specific. Send money through established remittance channels rather than goods. Cash reaches families faster and lets them buy what they actually need from local markets, which also supports the local economy's recovery. Support organizations with existing operations on the ground in northwestern Haiti rather than newly formed relief efforts. And keep communication expectations realistic. Cellular networks in the most affected areas are damaged and congested, and silence from family in the first days most often reflects infrastructure failure rather than the worst. For everyone else watching, the Caribbean plate boundary is one of the most consequential and least covered seismic systems in the Western Hemisphere. It will produce more earthquakes like this one. It will eventually produce larger ones. The difference between the Cuban and Haitian death tolls from the same shaking this week is the entire argument for why building codes, civil defense systems, and preparedness culture are not abstractions. They are the line between 26 deaths and a number that is still climbing. Final thought. The Oriente Fault has been accumulating strain along Cuba's southern coast for at least 2 centuries. On August 3rd, it released that strain in 40 seconds. The earthquake itself was a geological inevitability, the specific date unknowable, the eventual event certain. What was not inevitable was what it found when it arrived: a Cuban city whose civil defense system activated within minutes, and Haitian coastal towns where 16 years of compounding crisis have left communities facing a magnitude 7.6 with unreinforced walls and hospitals hours away. The next rupture on this plate boundary is already loading. The septentrional fault beneath 1 million people in Santiago de los Caballeros is within its recurrence window. The stress transfer from August 3rd is being modeled right now. The science is doing its work. Whether the region's governments, institutions, and international partners do theirs in the years between this earthquake and the next one is what will write the next death toll before the next fault fails. We will track the aftershock sequence, the stress transfer modeling, the humanitarian response, and every significant development from this event as it unfolds. Subscribe so you do not miss the updates, and leave that comment below if you are in the Caribbean or have family there. Tell us what you are seeing and hearing, because in the first days after an earthquake like this, accurate information from the ground is worth more than anything else we can offer. 6,000 likes on this one. Let us go. Sources: USGS event page and shake map M7.6 Oriente Fault Zone earthquake, August 3, 2026. Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, Caribbean Threat Messages, August 3, 2026. UWI Seismic Research Center Rapid Assessment Bulletin, Dr. Joan Lachman. Cuban Civil Defense, Defense of Civil Situation Reports. Haiti Direction de la Protection Civile Preliminary Casualty Reports. USGS 2010 Haiti Earthquake Summary and Casualty Documentation. USGS 2021 NIPIS Haiti Earthquake Documentation. Calais et al. GPS Studies of Caribbean Plate Motion. Paleoseismic Studies of the Septentrional Fault. Prentice et al. Historical Documentation of the 1842 Cap Haitian and 1946 Samana earthquakes. French Geological Survey Broome Caribbean Seismic Monitoring Documentation.